Hi everyone, welcome to the Festive Tech Calendar 2021. My name is Mohammed Sajid, most people know me as Saj, and this is a session on Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management. Before I begin, I want to give a huge shout out to Gregor Suti, Richard Hooper, and the entire Festive Tech Calendar team for making this possible. Festive Tech Calendar are raising money for Girls Who Code. The Just Giving link is listed below and can be directly accessible from the Festive Tech Calendar website. Please consider donating. Thank you. Most of this session will be a demo, but I wanted to cover some of the key points before we begin. Traditionally, we use RBAC, role-based access control, based on the principle of least privilege to grant users a minimum set of rights privileges to be able to do their job. And those privileges are assigned either to the user or to the group, and users are added to the group and they inherit those privileges. PIM represents the next step, the next evolution in access control. PIM based on the understanding that roles in Azure AD should not be permanently assigned to users or groups, whether those roles are predefined or custom created. Users can be granted time-limited access for the duration that they need those elevated privileges for. This is also known as just-in-time access, supported through an activation process. A user can request activation for those additional privileges that they need to do their role, and as part of that activation process, they need to provide justification for why they are requesting those additional privileges. If you use a change management system and the user has raised a ticket that corresponds to the request for elevated privileges, you can configure so the user has to provide that change number as part of the activation process. The maximum duration that those roles can be activated for is 24 hours. After 24 hours, those rights, those additional privileges are revoked. If the user requires additional privileges beyond the 24-hour period, he or she needs to go through the activation process again and request those additional privileges. The default period defined is 8 hours, and I believe the minimum is half an hour. It also allows you to do other things like enforce MFA for role activation. So if you're not using MFA for your users in the environment, if they request additional privileges, you can have the user prove who they are by having an MFA prompt for that particular user. This is known as eligible assignment. You also have the concept of active assignment. So in your environment, you might have users like help desk administrators that require those rights, those additional privileges all the time. You don't want a help desk administrator to be going through requesting privileges every single day. So you can have an active assignment, and that active assignment is with the user until it's revoked. Now it can be assigned for an indefinite period, or it could be assigned and it could be time limited. So in your environment, if you have contractors that you've hired for a duration of 3 months, 6 months, the active assignment can be active for a period of 3 months, 6 months, a week, 3 days, whatever the duration you require it to be. And after that duration, those rights, those elevated privileges are revoked. You have access to a full audit history. By default, it's kept for 30 days, and if you require, you can download that as a CSV file. Another thing to bear in mind is to manage role assignment for other administrators. You need to either be a global administrator or a privileged role administrator. Privileged identity management is a premium product, so you do require Azure AD Premium P2 or Enterprise Mobility and Security EMS E5 license. Now in our demo, we have two users. First user has global administrator roles as an active assignment assigned to them, John McLean. Now on the home page, John has access to PIM because he's accessed it before, but if you haven't accessed PIM previously, at the search bar up here, if you type in PIM or Privileged Identity Management and select Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. Now on the home page, this is where all the magic happens. On the left hand side under tasks, you have my roles, and as it states, my roles are the roles that are assigned to John McLean. So if you select my roles, you will see that John has no eligible assignments. He has a single active assignment, and the active assignment is Global Administrator, and it's assigned as a permanent assignment. John has made no request at this moment in time, and he has nothing to approve. Under Azure AD roles, There's a lot that can be done here. Assign eligibility, activate your role, approve request, view your history. So view your history shows you the audit of everything that's been happening in the environment. Remove eligible membership, add eligible member, etc. And this is available for up to 30 days by default. If you need to export it, you can click on export and it will generate a CSV file for you. If there are any alerts in your environment, they can be seen under alerts. In the test environment, we have a single alert that shows roles that MFA is not configured for at this moment in time. Roles that don't require MFA upon activation. Directory reader role, Azure AD join device local administrator role. If you need to configure access reviews for any of the access being granted, they can be configured here. Any assignments that have been configured, whether they are eligible assignments or active assignments, can be seen under assignments. In the test environment, we have a number of eligible assignments assigned to John Jones as Azure AD Joint Device Local Administrator and an eligible assignment of Global Administrator. In both cases, those need to be requested and either somebody will need to approve them or deny the request. You also have the Azure AD Joint Device Local Administrator assigned to a group. We will cover that towards the end of the demo. Under settings, you have all the roles that are listed. Now, any role that's been modified from the default settings are shown at the top here as user administrator, global administrator have been modified. Everything else that has a default setting is configured below. If you look through the list, you will see there are more than just Azure AD roles in here. You have Exchange Administrator, SharePoint Administrator, Dynamics 365 Administrator. You'll have Intune Administrator in this list that can be used to be managed through PIM. If you have any custom roles that have been created, they can also be managed through PIM. Under roles, again, it lists all the roles, and here's where you will configure assignments. So for our example, we're going to be using the user administrator role. And at the moment, there are no eligible assignments or active assignments for the user administrator. Also, if on the left hand side, you can configure the role settings directly from here. So if you quickly look at the role settings for the user administrator role, the maximum duration has been changed to 24 hours, 1 day. We've requested that a ticketing information needs to be provided on approval, and we've configured one approver, which is John McLean. We'll assign, under eligible assignments, we'll configure an assignment for one of our users, Hans Gruber. On the next page, you can configure whether the assignment is eligible or active. For both eligible or active, you can configure them as permanent or have a time-based assignment, start date and end date. If you're going to configure an active assignment for Hans, you will need to provide a justification. In that example, we will leave it as eligible and we will leave it permanently assigned at this moment in time. So if we look at Hans Gruber is logged into Azure PIM. If we navigate to Azure Active Directory and we look under users, you will see that Hans has no ability to create a new user at this moment in time. So if you navigate to PIM as Hans and we look under the roles for Hans, you will see a single eligible assignment for user administrator. Hans has no active assignments and no expired assignments at this moment in time. So to activate the role, select Activate. By default, the duration of 24 hours is activated. You can provide a custom duration, 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. Also, if you are requesting permissions, elevated permission as part of a change and the change is sometime in the future, if you select custom activation start time, you can provide a custom start date and a custom start time for your role. We requested that a change number be provided, so in our example we will provide a change number, and the reason for requesting the elevated privileges is to implement a change. So if we select Activate, that will now require approval by John Jones, who's the approver for John McLean, who's the approver for this particular role. So under Azure AD roles and approve requests, you will see a single approval. The approval is for the requester is Hans Gruber. Reasons to implement the change. The change number has been provided, so if you need to reference the change in a change ticketing system, you can look at the change. So if you select user administrator, the single request for approval, you can approve or deny. So we can approve that role. Again, you will need to provide justifications. So we can say to implement change, CHG. So that role has now been activated for Hans Gruber. If you look at Hans, you see a single eligible assignment. If you look on the active assignments, there's no active assignments at this moment in time. It might take a little time to appear. So if you look at Azure AD now for Hans, and if you go to users, it still doesn't have the ability to sign in. So if that's the case, if we sign out of the Azure portal and sign back in, because I have MFA configured for the user, I will approve the request. Now if we navigate back to Azure Active Directory and users, Hans should now have the ability to create new users, and he does. If you look at PIM for Hans, under my roles, you'll still see the eligible role. Now this is a role that he's eligible for and he can request activation for, but because the role is active, it will be shown in the active assignments. You see a single role that's been active and an end date and time specified for that particular role. So this is assigning a role to a single user. Now we also mentioned that you could assign roles to groups. So if you go back and look at John McLean, if you look at roles and we look at help desk administrator role, the help desk administrator role has no assignments at this moment in time, eligible or active assignments. But if we add an assignment, you will see there is a group that's been pre-configured, PIM, that we can add an assignment for. So if we select an assignment here and make this also an eligible assignment and activate, you will see that the group is now configured in here. So if we navigate to Azure AD and we look at groups, there's a couple of things that you need to bear in mind when it comes to PIM and groups. Groups that you're going to be used for role assignment need to be native Azure AD groups. They can't be groups that have been replicated to Azure AD. So if you're using a hybrid environment and you have AAD Connect and it's replicating groups from your on-premise environment to Azure AD, those groups cannot be used. The other thing within groups is when you create a group, if you look on the properties, you have the option to Azure AD roles can be assigned to the group. This needs to be enabled. It cannot be disabled once it's been enabled. So this feature will need to be enabled when you create a group. So in this group, there are no members. So if we add a member now, so if we add Hans to this group, he should inherit that role because he is now a member of this group. Hans is now a member of this group. So if we look at Hans assignment, log back in as Hans, and we navigate to PIM and roles. If it's not showing, if we sign back out and sign back in again, again I will approve the request. If you now navigate to PIM and we look at the roles assigned to Hans, Hans has 2 roles, and that role is inheriting because he's a member of that group that the role has been assigned to. For additional information on Azure PIM, if you navigate to docs.microsoft.com or to Microsoft Learn, there's a ton of information on there. I also suggest taking a look at John Saville's deep dive into privileged identity management. It is a great video to watch. If you want to reach out to me, my Twitter handle is @SajidCloud, and thank you for watching. I hope this was useful.